24%, right on the back of the COVID and the Black Sea Wars. And we took a number of measures to bring it down, mostly through inflation targeting by the central bank, and then also on the supply side, trying to drive down the drivers of inflation. This government is already beginning to signal that they are worried that inflation is going to go back up or be sticky, not come down like was programmed to come down. Remember that already the disinflation path says that we should be doing about 11% inflation by the end of this year, if we were using the path or the direction that the MPP was traveling on. And from all indication, there are worries that we may not be able to even sustain that 11% inflation average for this year. In fact, properly speaking, this government should be going down, I dare say, somewhere to about 7%. Because if you look at the disinflation path on the MPP program, which was bringing us to 11%, and their argument that they were going to do better, they should be doing 9, 8, or 7%. We did about 7.9% in the early years before COVID hit us. And they can do it if they focus on the interventions on the supply side. It is because they are not focusing on interventions on the supply side and putting money and efficiency behind those interventions that the central bank has to use its inflation targeting module and hike up the rates, which comes to punish all of us. So they have opportunity to do the right thing.
And as a stopgap measure, you will then not object to the 14.75% price rise in electricity tariffs as a way of plugging some of the fiscal slippages.
It's very interesting you ask that question, because when you read the IMF statement goes on to make the point that they are happy that the government has introduced the 14% tariff hike, and that they think that it is important to avoid what they call further fiscal slippages moving on. That is indication that part of what they are countering as our fiscal slippages, part of the, may I say, the assessment where they mark us down was that we didn't increase electricity bills enough. And so they are happy that this government has increased it by 14% because they believe that it will avoid fiscal slippages. We disagree with the IMF on that one. And when we're in power, we disagreed with them. We'll continue to disagree with them. As a government, you have to ask yourself a question: how much of these electricity bills can be passed on to the consumer at the end? If you sign a contract on the back end that is a capacity charge, which capacity charge has not been consumed by the consumer at home, it will be unconscionable for you to pass on the bill to the consumer at home. The PURC will not allow you to pass it on to the consumer at home. The PURC will say, well, it is you, the government, that signed a capacity charge for a take or pay clause with this producer. And so if that power has not been produced, you, the government, have to bear that. And the government can find ways by which it can ring fence and find other ways of paying for it, not necessarily through the budget. But what this government has elected to do is to pass it on to the consumer, 14% increase. Today I was listening to feedback from some consumers who say that, so if you took away 1% here and 10% on people who have earned from bettings, not everybody participates in it, only to slap 14% on what everybody consumes, even for what they have not consumed. Are people better off or are people worse off? So it is a choice that the government has made, and they will live or die by that sort. What we will keep recommending to the government is to tone down on the political rhetoric and focus rather on substantive work, and in particular, reduce expenditure, be more efficient in utilizing the available resources now, in investing in productive sectors so that you can generate a lot more growth and jobs. Encourage the private sector to come in, offer incentives to the private sector to come in so that the private sector can use its resources to do more of what government is using. I'll give you two final examples. Today, the government is refusing to renew the lease of multinational mining companies. A step that sends a very bad signal, if you put it together with many of the things the government has done in the gold industry, a very bad signal to the investor community. And so the private capital, and the last time, for example, that Goldfields invested in their Damang mine, it was about $1.7 billion. Private capital that you require like this to invest in the Ghanaian economy. The government is sending a signal that your investment is not fiscally or operationally safe in Ghana. And at the same time, the government is now taxing Ghanaians or borrowing money to give about $279 million to the gold board to go buy gold. At first, that $279 million is foreign exchange earnings that will come from, people who want to import gold into their countries, Indians, Turkish, Arabians, etc. Now the government priority has shifted from allowing them to bring their money to buy gold and take it out to using taxpayers' money to buy gold. And instead, where they were bringing their money to invest in mines, the government is introducing measures that discourage them from bringing their money into mining. So what we're saying to the government is that stop the propaganda, focus on the job, admit the economic progress, and rather introduce policies that will build on it and enhance. We inherited a debt of about $2.4 billion on the energy sector side. We introduced a number of measures that ensured, so this was a debt of $2.4 billion at a time when power was not stable. We introduced a number of measures that cost us about $6 billion to keep the lights on in 8 years. And at the time that we were leaving power, we had a debt of about $2.4 billion. $2.4 billion, mostly occasioned by the redundant capacity charges that the NDC themselves had signed up to. Now, we also believe that a lot more efficiency. So, my point on that is that the NDC cannot sustain the argument that we did not manage the energy sector well. You walk on the streets and anybody, on the streets will tell you that if it comes to managing the energy sector well, the NPP is done way better. In fact, this morning I was reading tweets from the Volta region and people complaining about Dumso and the Volta region. You've heard Dumso being complained about in the Ashanti region, etc. So on the assumption of office of the NDC, already people are beginning to complain about their inability to properly manage the energy sector. We will not be against private sector participation. No, we'll be interested in seeing the model for private sector participation that they bring in, because it would be unconscionable on our part, having tried private sector participation before, to come back and say we don't support private sector participation. That would be duplicitous. So we will be interested in seeing the model for private sector participation they want to bring, and the transparency and the gains that will come with it. And then we can take a definite position on whether or not we support a particular transaction that they'll put on the table. But I think as a political group, we have already demonstrated that we think private sector participation can bring efficiency in the energy sector.
Yes, nay, Adajani Posokra, a Walisa Hotel Cramante mu, and yet by Uncommon Frio.
That's it. Millions of Kaya name of credit. So the Kaya every general about why I got to 2024, and I'm so info. And I'm so active. And Professor Michael Quick Committee, so we film. Call my Ghana Hangina, Nami and Namswa, and no, it be in Choma, one far and number 2 acre. Me and no continue with Maria and ne. But I can say almost every year reports on air. I bet you and telephone. You see, I say, and of course, no meetings, no, I hold women. You did kind neck meetings, everybody kind acquisition. And more as I said, there's a part, there's a Lindy. Or more every year, no, a FINA, a national council meeting, and so about the problem. They know me, na a normal represent a report no ama a national council meeting no na and also every attempt so but no ka say afena and no every that so na Ghana man permit that kanana do down go so da bi pimu ha abi di actually en ka bi pimu ha the boy ni chidom na to also e wa ha say dem time to go tempe and before do no manauti leader everything before do no mo ka bia e wo mu no also about the pimu ha more effort, no naturally, national council meeting, as so. Now, some be an as a ne party ne form the pastor ye nam so na mo ebi ntwo no so busa me a metna ka say eye empanifo no ana people na be no meeting na ne mo baba ye no meeting no ye di kan national executive meeting aye neck no mo di kan aye wi am no ka say no you no pepe na fi national council meeting no so akọsọ achese no so wi a eno mo ntwa mbo nsem for amane ne court ni si gina na yo so yeti anya bi na so abo ati from there na mo ka say there metra ka say pelifo no do no aba de pimu e wa ha ka na man pani na de dia chire na dia u ball e chi dom ina aba de pimu ha but before the game no mo ka de yemu no aba de pimu e wa
Brana ma wi sese si ano se de man pani akufa man pani da akufa ne ba umia ene omobobom di na pomo nyina no yenhwe akitaafo no so aside se edom no party ni man bebrebe abaho anase sai ne nema sistie ewo ho
ba mi no ka sai pepe ade ni party fo no do no a na ni padodo a na hu wo ha ye un se ibidum ho ha na wo enko bi e fo mu guru boy sa na me de fo mu wo mo no e bi se le kwa e bi se mo do mo samrane na mo ye mo de ko no abari bi ha mo party fo no akasa de se bi a party supporters a bi bi a wa party atade ni ade no de do no ami hu do ha sei nemum very prakaze guru boys no anase mrantie no a ebrebia no sempelifo no kwa no mo sa wo no obo de do na ba de pie mu ha sei a wo mo enso e wa ha
Kwame adwumai wa ya che ya reporting ne awrade a odomo a ene Kesman 92.9 kamante mu ya pejwa mo ya se mu fo hoi se ya chonso ha be hu ya se ene wa ya kefo o mo pipesi ni bia liki o bibi ne yesi aliki okọ ho no se de yesi nya ne ntie se report ni bia liki ho ga ba ya hu se mebrebe enei wodu asoto to fem no wo titi it de ni betimi afiri mu aba ankasa
winya no kwe pero okeka kana bia people abonte se report no bia liki no ba ha no pa bia betimi akasa you know you can't say something for no si bu ano pelifo no a wo eka bia ewu a ni tira ka say wo no ekiti bi ade na ndemom breaking news alert media ma a ni me say Dr. Tupuku Pempe a wono ne bo Dr. Mama Bami Achidom woni ya di akekwe komo na nkomo no no ka say anayegusa ne say wetin na inform me say 2028 ange ono so po so ba tutu franka no edi abako pre edi o si ade dia no ko bi anim onye na den onye na de kwa so obebi hisa ntamonfo a nam ya ne ade nyina no obo ntumi na ono de ebrebia no a party be to afre no se ebia pataba omia ana ebia mpo yes ato abama no ananso moto abama no muyi no so muyi no so ebo ti be mo obeko na mu onye na de so no so e kwa kutina se ankranko ananso no so apre se franka no bitu aka ama ebia ma mekuo no entiano so nkomo a ye ba ye ne na bia Developmental take the back na moabo na manfat the report in Muslim no kasa de let na kasa the sa entuminta na ka bia de wa apie Alisa hotel dada no nam ko mu ano a wati bi no eno ano da so nam so minimum Alisa ha de bia say bia report ni bi say asi na say bi say akoso
me do wie kura no Kwame unsa na nsai mu ene omo kasa de man pipia mnyekuo no no omo kasa de bo ye wura ba omi a chi dom no ene bebrebe no asa atene wo ho a omo kasa se ene woye one candidate de ma NPP e last elections ni mu enti omugidi ye se ene akompra ko Japan ene opai ne fans no wosoro pa fi se na Ghana for me kan yenim genim ko yenua aboa papo wakasa se bi na ukoye Kennedy akompra ko Japan ene enipa hodu awo ye some person mo twetwe omuti omo so aba ho
no kasa de ofi ade omo emara izan se next meeting no Penifua was a baby, national chairperson, past president, vice president, past, and then a candidate, baby, past chief of staff, baby, national vice chairman, second vice chairman, third and general secretary, deputy general secretary, national treasurer, baby, and a minority leader, national organizer, deputy and national organizer, baby, national chairman. council of elders ɔno nso ɛbɛba national women organization ɛbɛba bi nti mpanyinfoɔ bɛɛ gbogbo ɔmo na ɛba ɛyɛ meeting ma ne ɔmo bɛtumi aba nti ɔnabɔ pɛrɛ da kɔmpɛrɛ da pɔn dɛm no kasa bi nyɛ ehu no ɛwɔ ha sei na mmom anaasɛ aboa papa mu na tikyafoɔ bi no na ehu ebi awɔ ha ɛba tuntun sɛ ɛbɛba ebi esan sɛ ɛbɛrɛ bi ɛtɛm no ɔmo yɛ na kinti na de na ɔno nso ɛka ho bi a yɛ ana ɔba bi nti na no kasa deɛ ɛnyɛ maa yɛ ɛno ɛna ɛno yɛ 2 o'clock council national council meeting no na ɛno yɛ 2 o'clock nti ebi a afei na wɔn ɛbɛba esan sɛ na bank ɔkufo adɔkora no ɔba yɛ ɛnkyɛn.
na sɛ nomi yɛ na dwumadie no bɛkɔ so ne mampani yɛde kia ba ɔne na bɛbi akyiri na sɛ mu nyinaa no nipa dodoɔ yɛ na ka mehwɛ no mu kwa so bɛba yi a yɛ nim so bɛba na so ma yɛ so ma amade a na sɛ mbɛti Africa husband ha yɛ sɛ ɛne makoko kyerɛ sɛ de nkrofo bi kekeka no do 2 franc ade ma wɔ mo na wa amwa na bɛdi akyiri so amwa nti sei enti saa na ɔmbɛti Africa ɔnyɛ saa
nti ano na report ɔmo ba bɛma national council meeting no kɔ so a na ɔmo apresente ama ɔmo na afei ɔmo ahwɛ meeting no sɛ bi a yɛkɔɔyɛ senior sɛ yɛ no ɛno na ebinom nso sɛ dɔkɔ ano bɔkɔ na Japan so no ɛm sɛ ebinom nso bɔ no so wɔ sɛ abatumi nso ɔno nso rules no ɔno nso ka ho bi sɛ nsɛm bi a ɔkaeɛ no ɛno ana nam so ama kyerɛ sɛ amanfoɔ bi anaa mbisifoɔ bi so yɛ a wɔn ɛde eti a ɛyɛ mpɛmɛ yɛ kuo na ɛno deɛ ne baa no amanfoɔ di sɛ na meka sɛ guru boys bi ade no wɔn nso keka bi saa ɛwɔ ha so yɛ a report no si sɛ ibi saa ɛwɔ mu eti megye di sɛ ɔno nso ba bɛ pie mu ɛwɔ ha se na sɛ report no wɔn asɛm ɛfɔm bɛfa so no ne nyinaa mu no ɔmo nsan sɛ ɛnyam kyerɛ sɛ obi a report no wɔn asɛm ɛwɔ mu biara no ɛwɔ sɛ ɔba na afei deɛ no ɛkasa dɛ pan a ɔbɛtumi afa so a 2028 ɔbɛtumi aka ɔmo atumi agye ɛyɛ akonnwa no.
Kwame kamija mu akona we nso ba bebo me yɛhwɛ ade we sɛ sɛdeɛ ɔmusi ka no sɛdeɛ yɛde yɛagya yɛ wɔ hɔ tete bia na yesu